At around 10:30 p.m., alarms began to sound inside the green zone. Seconds later, the sky above Baghdad flashed. Not once, multiple times. Then came the sound. Not a single explosion, but a pattern. Controlled, repeated, close. And the target was not a military base. It was the United States Embassy. So here's the question no one is answering clearly. How does one of the most heavily protected diplomatic zones in the world keep getting hit? The attack did not come out of nowhere. Tension had already been building for days. High-level Iranian figures were being eliminated. Quietly, precisely, publicly. Names that rarely appear in headlines, suddenly gone. Figures linked to security networks, intelligence chains, strategic planning. And then came reports about Ali Larijani, a political heavyweight, deeply connected. Then another name surfaced, Esmail Khatib, a figure tied to intelligence operations. Not officially confirmed in all channels, but widely discussed. And this is where things change. Because when leadership layers start getting hit, responses do not stay direct. They become indirect, distributed, deniable. That is exactly what happened next. Instead of a direct Iranian strike, militias moved. Groups inside Iraq, armed, trained, funded over years, often described as Iranian-backed, but operating on local ground. And this is the part most people miss. These groups do not need advanced air forces. They do not need expensive missiles. They use something far simpler: rockets, short-range systems, and increasingly, drones. Reports suggest the attack involved a mix, possibly multiple rockets, and at least one unmanned aerial system. Small, hard to detect, even harder to intercept at low altitude. The embassy defenses reacted. Systems inside the green zone activated. Interceptors fired. But not everything was stopped. And that is the real concern, because this is not about damage. It is about access. The green zone is supposed to be the safest area in Baghdad. Layered security, controlled entry points, multiple defense systems. And yet, projectiles still got through. That tells you something important. Either the attack was launched from very close range or the detection came too late. Now think about that for a second. If launch sites are nearby, then the threat is already inside the city, blended with civilian areas. Hard to track. Harder to strike back without escalation. And this is where the situation becomes more complex, because the United States is not just defending. It is also striking far from Baghdad, near the Strait of Hormuz. That area matters more than most people realize. It is one of the most critical energy choke points in the world. A narrow passage where a large portion of global oil moves every day. Any disruption there affects everyone. Reports indicate that U.S. forces targeted missile infrastructure, specifically hardened sites, underground storage, and launch facilities. The kind that require specialized weapons to destroy. So-called bunker busters, designed to penetrate before detonation. And this is where things shift again, because hitting those sites sends a message, not just to militias, but directly to Tehran. You hit our embassy, we hit your strategic assets. Different battlefield, same conflict. But here's the dangerous part. These are not equal exchanges. One side uses proxies. The other uses precision strikes. That creates a gap, and gaps create miscalculation. Now add another layer, a name that surfaced during this escalation, Abu Ali al-Askari, a spokesperson linked to Hezbollah brigades in Iraq. Reports suggest he was eliminated. Again, not all sources aligned fully, but the signal is clear. Voices are being silenced. Networks are being disrupted. And when communication channels break, groups act more independently, more aggressively, with less control. This is where things start to spiral, because instead of one coordinated response, you get multiple smaller ones, faster, less predictable, harder to stop. So what happened in Baghdad is not an isolated strike. It is part of a chain reaction. Leadership hits, proxy, retaliation, counter strikes, then more retaliation. And this is the part most people underestimate. The battlefield is expanding, not in a single direction, but outward. The embassy attack is a signal, not just of capability, but of intent. And the real question is no longer, who launched the rockets? It is this: how many more places can this conflict reach before someone loses control? The attack on the embassy was not the peak. It was a warning. Because what followed did not slow down. It spread. Within hours, security alerts expanded beyond Baghdad. U.S. personnel across Iraq were placed on higher readiness. Convoys adjusted routes. Air defenses stayed active longer than usual. This was not routine anymore. So here is the deeper question. Why respond in Iraq to events that started elsewhere? The answer lies in how modern conflict works now. It is no longer about one battlefield. It is about networks, influence, reach. Iran does not need to strike directly every time. It has spent years building connections across the region. Groups that can act quickly, without waiting, without formal orders being visible. And this is where things become harder to control. Because once these networks activate, they do not always stop on command. The militias in Iraq are not identical. Some are tightly aligned, others operate with partial independence. Different leaders, different priorities, same broad direction. So when high-level figures are targeted, each group reacts in its own way. Some send messages, others take action, and some escalate further than expected. This is the part most people miss. Decentralization makes retaliation faster, but it also makes it unpredictable. Now combine that with what is happening at sea. Near the Strait of Hormuz, U.S. strikes targeted missile positions linked to Iranian infrastructure. These were not symbolic targets, they were functional, launch systems, storage points, operational nodes, and that matters because those systems are part of a larger strategy. Area denial, the ability to threaten shipping lanes, energy routes, global supply chains. If those systems are degraded, it limits pressure. But it also increases urgency on the other side. And this is where tension rises again, because every strike carries a message, and every message demands a response. But responses are no longer symmetrical, they are layered. A bunker buster hits a hardened site, and a militia fires rockets at an embassy. Different scale, same signal. This imbalance creates a dangerous illusion. It feels contained, but it is not, because each side is testing limits, quietly, repeatedly. Now look at the pattern. Leadership figures eliminated. Proxy attacks increase, strategic sites targeted, then more proxy attacks. This is not random, it is a feedback loop. And feedback loops do not stay stable for long. They either cool down or they accelerate. Right now, the signs point to acceleration. And here is why that matters globally. The Strait of Hormuz is not just a regional issue, it is a global artery. A significant portion of the world energy supply passes through it. Even a small disruption can shift prices, affect economies, trigger wider reactions. So when strikes happen near that area, markets watch, governments watch. Everyone recalculates risk, and this is where things become more serious than they appear. Because the conflict is no longer just military, it is economic, strategic, global. Now return to Baghdad. The embassy was not destroyed. There was no large-scale devastation reported. But that is not the point. The point is this. It was reachable, again, and that changes perception, not just for the United States, but for every country watching. If a heavily fortified diplomatic zone can be targeted repeatedly, then no location feels fully secure. And this is the real payoff. The power in this conflict is not just in destruction. It is in pressure, constant, persistent, expanding. Each strike, each response, and each message pushes the boundary a little further, until one day, someone crosses a line they did not intend to cross. And that is how larger conflicts begin, not with a single decision, but with a series of small escalations that no one fully controls anymore. So the embassy attack in Baghdad is not just another headline. It is a signal, a glimpse into a system under stress, a system where direct war is avoided. But indirect conflict is everywhere. And the most important question now is not, who fired the rockets? It is this, how long can this balance hold before it breaks? If you found this breakdown useful, consider subscribing.